to Conversations Over at Cappuccino, and today we are in Saugerties with Ze'ev Willy Neumann.
That's right.
And welcome to Conversations Over Cappuccino.
Thank you.
So now, tell us about you and your art.
Okay.
And I'll go back behind the camera.
Okay. I'm an artist, I'm a sculptor. Initially I came in 1974 to New York City.
From Israel.
I came from Israel, right? I had a girlfriend in Israel for 2.5 years. She came back to New York City to do her master's degree in musicology. She studied at Juilliard. And I was supposed to come, I'm saying supposed because I'll tell you in a minute. I was supposed to come right after, and we were supposed to get married and get together. But it was 1973, and the Yom Kippur War erupted, and that totally delayed my plans. And obviously the war erupted, and there was no way that I could come to the state. I served 5 months in the Sinai Desert in reserve, and after I finished that in 1974, in April, I came to the state and joined together with my wife, that-to-be. We got married 2 or 3 months later. We knew they were going to do that, and here I am, an American citizen, and I'm in the States. I thought I'm going to come here for 5 years only, but lo and behold, here I am 43 or so years later. I have a background, obviously, of an artist. I studied art in Israel in a school of plastic art in Bat Yam.
So you were always an artist?
I was always energetic with a creative energy. I started as a gymnast, serious gymnast. I was actually trained by an Olympic trainer, a Hungarian one that came from Israel in 1956 after the revolution. And I took it very seriously. I was totally committed. Unfortunately, I was a sickly boy at the time, and I got rheumatic fever, which totally took me out of the gymnastics. I stayed almost a year in bed, and I converted myself into expressing myself with gymnastics into art. I love Leonardo da Vinci, and I had a book and I copied him forever. And there I am, starting to involve myself into art. And this was when I was about 13, 14, 15. At the age of 14, after grammar school, I did not go to high school. For some reason, I'm actually am still dyslexic, and I couldn't keep up with the rest of the students. I mean, I was always behind, but yet I was talented. And so my talent kind of helped me out. And at the age of 15, I left home. I went to Tel Aviv, and I started to study in a school named the Plastic Art. At the same time, I was also apprenticing as an apprentice in one of the most prestigious graphic art studios in Tel Aviv. They made the stamps and the currency of the country. Mentoring was actually my savior. I had 2 mentors that up till today I always remember them with sentiments, and thanks to them I actually am where I am. The idea was, when I went to school, I was accepted as a young person, as the youngest person in school. I suppose it was because of my talent. Most of the students in school were after the army service, which they were after 20, 22, 23, and 4, and so on. So I befriended people that were at least 5 years older than I am. So my peers in my age were children, were not serious, and they didn't have the kind of attitude that I adapted from my older friends, and got involved in jazz and smoked cigarettes, and had some wonderful, really wonderful time in terms of sort of practicing my art, going to nature and painting. That was my initial introduction to art. Then came the army. Well, I turned 18, and I thought I'm going to be a graphic artist in the army, but they gave me 3 choices: infantry, infantry, or infantry.
Oh.
I weighed 100 pounds, but I was very energetic, and there I was for 2.5 years. My last 2 months in the service was in the Six-Day War. Most of my service, I served at the foot of Golan Heights. Many times we had shootouts, and as a soldier, I had many times were in ambushes. But anyway, the Six-Day War was my last service. And yes, as soon as I finished the army, my hair got longer, and there I am introduced to what we call nafas, which is hash. I started to work I sort of neglected my dream to be an artist for a while, and I started to work as a scenery builder and designer. So I worked in the movies and got involved in the movie industry. So in 1974, I came to the city, New York City, and I started to do all sorts of things regarding scenery. I met a friend that I worked with in the movies in Israel, and he was a sound editor, and he had a studio in the Brill building, from all places, Timpan Alley. It's the corner of 50th, between 50th and 49th Street on Broadway. That building was known as the music industry. Everybody that was involved in music came and bought sheet music. It was a really adventurous place. Started to do a little carpentry, and one day somebody asked me if I can build him something, and there was a little space in that building, and I did. I built him a cabinet. And there I was, I said, oh, why don't I, now that I can build a cabinet, I can rent a shop and start working on a cabinetry, but then at the same time, I've actually remembered that I've neglected my dream, which was to become an artist. So that was a combination of doing art and doing carpentry. In other words, making a living out of carpentry and started to accumulate a body of art, a body of sculptures in this case. And I got in touch with the material, and I love the volume, and I love to touch things and make things, and started to do art. And there was a yard where in Brooklyn, that's most of my shop time I spent in Brooklyn, 22 years. I was in Tribeca at the time, and I used to go to Brooklyn to a yard that they used to disassemble townhouses, and this terrific lumber of 16 inches by 12 or 18 by 16, and I would take a big chunk of wood, which mostly was Douglas fir, which is a wonderful color. I have a sculpture here with Douglas fir, but very hard to work with. But still, with my enthusiasm, I was able to conquer the wood and make what came out. So this was within the course of, from the 70s. In 1977, I had a child born named Adam. And then all the responsibility came upon me. I had a car, I had a son, I had an apartment, and a wife, of course.
Back to carpentry.
Yes. Well, I started to build a body of work. I moved to another place. I moved to Williamsburg in Brooklyn. I was on the 4th floor with a hand-operated elevator, a huge elevator that I used to land right into my shop, open the doors. I could bring any material, any size. And there I was, looking over at Brooklyn on the 4th floor, including the twins, which I'll come up to a little later. And just started to venture into sculpting. Sculpting in my mind is not necessarily a figurative piece. It's not something that, it has the three-dimensionality to it, but it's not necessarily what we accustomed to in terms of, classic sculptures. This was about 3 years ago. In this case, it's about 11 feet tall. I've made a series of this, close to 70 sticks like that. They're all painted. I call the series From Floor to Ceiling. So the idea is that the piece is just over the size of from the floor to the ceiling, and you jam the piece right between the floor and the ceiling, and you can imagine if I put a series of sticks like that, it becomes sort of a curtainish kind of a piece. This is Douglas fir. Could you kindly go up and down? Okay, I call this a double, what did I call here? A double horn and a ball, but the truth is that initially it's called horny, as in desired.
And that also goes.
That goes right in between. This is Douglas fir, by the way, and you can see the lush skin-like color. And this piece and many other pieces came from a series that I called Do Touch. And the idea came from the sense that when blind people do not get to touch art, and actually it's breaking the fourth wall. You're not allowed to, breaking the fourth wall. In other words, there it is, art is for your eyes only. But in my case, or at least this series case, is I'm letting you touch my art. And I had the blind in mind. Here's a series that I made. It's called Spears into Art. It comes from the idea swords into plowshares and spears into pruning shears or something of the sort. Anyway, it's the idea of no more war. And so I've created over 20 pieces with the idea of spear and see what I can do with that. So in this case, they're pinned in the center, and I can create a different configuration.
Oh, very beautiful. Wow. That's amazing.
Again, this is an interactive,
Very dynamic.
an interactive piece. The funnest thing to do is show it to kids and have them starting to move that. What I want to show here in this piece is that it goes from simple form, which is right here as you look at it. It's simple, black, and then as you go sideways, it becomes more and more complex. And you can see the complexity of it as you come forward. I'm obsessed with cubes, and I've created many, many pieces with cubes. So this is one introduction to it. I've created quite a lot of pieces. I'm fascinated with the idea of cubes, and especially if you walk around the streets, obviously every house and every item around you is sort of cubical. But it has a certain boredom to it because it stays still, and I love the idea of taking the cube from a boring position and giving it the angle, and then it creates a certain tension and excitement.
So show us the development. I'm a little confused by that. When you say each one is a little more complex, but they're all cubes.
Well, yes, but in order to see that, you have to come over here. You have to come over here and look at it this way. In other words, wait. Look at me. You come from here, and then you go to the side, and you keep your eyes on the piece, and you'll see the complexity of it.
I see. So you're seeing the different sizes.
Exactly. And it becomes, and even keep going.
Yes.
And keep going. Go through the loop, and you can see me. You have to look around it, and in this case, the piece changes as you go around it. Well, you know, if you have a certain sensitivity, you will get that. But the truth is that a lot of people come by, look at it, and just continue walking.
Yes, of course.
So,
because it's just a bunch of cubes.
exactly.
They miss the whole point.
They miss the point. That's why what I like to do is what I'm doing with you now. I kind of like to shake people up and take them to a little tour and give them a little sense of what I had in mind.
You know, I have this whole thing, you know, there's this movement in art that, you know, that people have to just experience it. But, you understand, but to just look at that, I mean, if I looked at that, I would say, oh, why did he put up some cubes? You know,
Yeah.
cheap.
Well, I'll show you.
You understand, but as you talk about it, let me stop. You know, as you talk about it, the richness of it comes through.
Right.
So that's very interesting. Okay.
This is also from the Do Touch series. In this case, chain and ball. This is obviously a topic that kind of pounds in my ear forever. I mean, it's connected to slavery, it's connected to all sorts of associations.
Tell us about this.
Okay, this is again from the same series that I told you about before, Do Touch. In this case, this is mahogany, and the idea is meant exactly for a blind person. I deliberately, if you go into a museum as a blind person, you're never going to get a sense of Renoir or Picasso. Of course not, because you're not allowed to touch that. But the same thing, you're not going to get a sense of Rodin, for example. And when they go to see a show, what they get is a little model of the piece that they're standing in front, and they just run their finger across it to get a sense of what this humongous piece that they're standing in front of. And that bothered me. I really wanted to make a piece specifically for the adventure of the hand. In this case, I call this piece Spinal Run.
That's a beautiful
And you just, as you close your eyes, you can run to the piece and imagine how it looks and how it feels. And I get a lot of wonderful comments. But I wish I can, at one point, put a few pieces in some kind of a showroom and have blind people specifically coming and touching my pieces. Some of them are a little tiddling, with a little hint towards, you know, sensuality, if you wish. Yes. But it'll give me a lot of pleasure to see a blind person touching my piece and smiling. So it'll give me a sense that he got it.
Do you tell people to close their eyes?
Yes, I do. I actually tell them. Some people are really embarrassed because they think I'm trying to trick them. Yes. But they're open-minded people that are doing it, and I can see that they're enjoying it. And some people just, as you wander around, come again to that piece and they touch it. I love to wash dishes. That's why I do things that are touchable.
So anyway, yes, here's your cubes again.
Keep the camera and catch up the entire piece if you can, not just a section. This is, in this case, this piece, again, meant to, as you see, I didn't want to make the cubes in that boring shape, or rather boring position, and so I positioned them, and it meant to be done exactly like that, and it meant to turn. One of the things that really happened, which is, as we call it, a lucky accident, or rather a happy accident, is if you concentrate on the piece, you'll see that the piece is turning, and at one point it'll start turning to the other side, which is an optical illusion. I don't know if the camera
It's an optical illusion. Let me see if go ahead.
Yeah, the usual thing is that when people stand close to it, I tell them to close one eye.
I can see that.
Can you see that it turned?
Yes, you can see it right on. It goes back and forth, but that's an optical illusion.
It is an optical illusion, and it's called happy accident. I didn't mean it, but it happened.
Really is interesting.
Right. I have a few pieces there.
I didn't mean that.
No, I didn't mean for that to happen, but as soon as it happened, I jumped up and down because, lo and behold, the piece got another dimension to it. So it, you know, beside what I wanted, it became one more added goodie to it.
That's amazing. That's really extraordinary. It's not just a goodie.
This is again from the series Spears into Art. I've made, as I said, over 20 pieces of them. Everybody, I don't know if you're familiar with this. With this, it's Kilroy was here. This is in memory. I have a very, very strong sentiment towards. Well, I don't have. I mean, but my parents are survivors of the Holocaust, so a lot of my history or my being is attached to the Holocaust and to World War II. This is there is a little a doodle that has a little bit of history, but basically the soldiers of the American soldier, whenever they came and they relieved the town from the Nazis, they scribbled on the wall that Kilroy was here. It's safe to be here. And again, you notice the little blue tip here and the red tip here. These are brushes.
Oh, yes, very pretty.
And that's the very image. This is a piece that I had in mind specifically and deliberately. I wanted to create something that has its opposite. In other words, I call it spear in the box, but I also call it defensive offensive. In other words, it's offensive when the case is closed. Imagine that I'm taking it to an airport, and then what do you got there? I got a spear in the box. Oh, and there goes a whole hoopla. But anyway, the box and the spear is threatening you when the box is closed because you imagine a spear in a box, which is offensive. But soon as I open it up, it reveals itself and it's become defensive. In other words, it's disarmed. It disarms you. So that's the idea in this case.
Oh, I see. So they overlap, of course, so that they.
Of course,
they're
very accurately overlap, very accurately. And the box is just an image. I don't care how it looks, and of course I can close it and take it off the wall, and walk with it as if it was a suit.
You play with. You have a sense of play with everything you do. It's
Well, I mean, the idea with art is that I like you to have a little more of an adventure than just looking at something and passing by as if, and then, forgetting about it. I like the idea of putting a smile on your face. I like the idea because then I know that I've reached you and you understood, or at least you got a hint of what I wanted to do. In this case, this is a square, and again, with my spear collection. And if you come really close, you see that the edges are sharp as a needle. And so, again, I've taken the idea of spear and I kind of squared it. I also have another spear that is coiled. And in this case, I squared it. And I have another one that is coiled. I have quite a collection of them. This is another one that came from the idea of floor to ceiling.
Yes. And it does go floor to
Black
ceiling.
and white. It has a little bit of an optical illusion to it because as you look at it, it sort of deceives you and it takes away the sense of depth. Because as you look at it from here, you don't get the sense of how deep the wall behind it because of the sort of the polka dot or the images that are sequenced on the piece. You will see it more as you stand next to it, or rather in front of it.
In front of it, that we have a polka dot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to just walk.
Oh, I see. Well, very interesting. Do that again. Yes. Very, very beautiful. Well, very interesting. Very playful, I shouldn't say.
Yes.
Not specifically beautiful.
Playfulness is
It's
very important.
playful for you.
Yes,
It's not,
I love playfulness.
It's not just the beauty itself.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the play. And we'll make this one the kind of the last, if
Okay.
you will, for now.
Let's talk about this piece.
Yes, this is a good way to end.
Yeah, actually, it's a good way to end.
Yes.
This piece is made out of styrofoam. We all admire books. I'm in awe of books. I mean, actually, if you look at some classic statues, the Greek sculptures, there's always a wonderful book that the wise man or some, made out of marble. This piece, we're losing the idea of a book, of something to hold. Here we are with computers, and we don't have, so in a way it's sort of a requiem to this item that we have for so many years. I've put that in a library of Woodstock. I've put it in the library of the high school here in Saugerties. And I have a line here that says, your life is an unwritten book, but it's up to you to write it. But there's another word that I'm looking for, but that's really the essence of it. It's up to you to write your life story.
Maybe I'll get in the picture here. Or closing thoughts. I don't want to restrain you.
All right,
but
all right.
My thoughts as you took me through this was the sense of playfulness and well, you say you have an obsession with cubes, and then there's this dimension of touch and the blind. So there's so much interweaving in your process.
Well, this is what I've always maintained that idea. An artist is an opinionated person. So with my art, I try to put down something that you come out of, not necessarily with an opinion, but if you really dig into it, it shows you that I have an opinion. But I want you to come up with some kind of, something that you have gained and you'll take away with you. Maybe you'll forget it a day or two later, but it'll come back at you at one point. So art is very, very important to our existence, because art is the essence of imagination. Without imagination, we're nowhere. I mean, I always love to use Jules Verne as the ultimate example of imagination. Here's a guy who wrote a book about venturing into the ocean, and lo and behold, years later, there was it right there. And it's always there in terms of, and art is the pioneer. Art is the pioneer. Artists are the pioneer, because they're not tied up with any kind of preconceived notion. They give themselves the freedom to think and to conceive and to just let it be. And that's how, well, of course, you have to be an artist. That's what you have to be committed to it. And that's how you come into ideas, and that's how you come to discoveries. You have to be committed to it. You cannot just sort of doodle and, I do art, and you draw flowers. That's not it. You can draw flowers, but with commitments.
And one more thought, what does art mean to you, for you as a person?
Well, I don't think I would be a living person without art. I'm not. It's the essence of me. I've spent in 2016 3 months in the hospital, really being in bad shape, close to dying. I lost my studio, but my only thought that really kept bothering me over and over again is that, my God, I'm going to have to reinvent myself because, of certain limitations that I've ended up with in my body. And so my only thought, the only thing that bothered me more than anything is, what am I going to do? How am I going to survive? What's going to happen to me as a person, as an artist? Because I knew that I'm going to have to reinvent myself. And that was the only thought that preoccupied me.
Wow.
I was ready to die, but that really was the primary thought. I kept tossing and turning, and I had to rethink everything. I had to rethink everything.
I think that's a perfect way to end, okay? And that's what this Portrait of an Artist series is about, is trying to understand not only the process that you go through with many of these pieces, but also the process in your mind as you develop them, and what you want to communicate. I mean, there's so many things. Yeah, the wonderful thing about artists is they can just keep going. I can do, and clearly with you, and we're going to come back for more in your studio and other things. And
My
try to
little
really-
teeny studio. I used to have 2,000 square feet. Now I have maybe 5 or less. Actually, no, I have maybe 400. But it doesn't matter.
Whatever, we're not so concerned about the size.
No.
The size of
Never mind the size. It's not the
Yes,
size.
the size. It's the power. Thank you for being with Conversations of Cappuccino.
My
And
pleasure.
this is
Thank you.
part 1
That's
of who knows where it will go.
okay. Great.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you take care.